Pascal, thank you for joining me. You're at Genome BC, which when we go back and take a look at the role that Genomics and Genome BC and researchers here in British Columbia played when it came to SARS, we know that we have a tremendous amount of intelligence, talent, and research ability to address this situation. But no matter what, when a crisis like this presents, you're forced to respond. What was it that you at Genome BC were able to do, and do so quickly, to be able to start to align the resources that are going to play an important role in how we deal with the COVID-19 crisis, particularly here in British Columbia, and then by extension to other jurisdictions around the world?
Yeah, we had an interesting conversation with the BC Centre for Disease Control in January. And one thing that's remarkable is that British Columbia has the BC Centre for Disease Control. Not every province does, and it has served us extremely well. And as a result of that conversation we had with them in late January, within about a week, we provided the BC CDC with $150,000 in funding to allow them to develop the capability of sequencing the virus and being able to establish the family tree of the virus, to recognize we have an infection, where does it come from, and to characterize this. So we have been doing that in BC since early February, and it has really allowed to identify hotspots and to react accordingly. And the reason we could do that is, as an organization, we can react quickly, unbureaucratically. And interesting enough, our 150,000 that we provided initially was topped up by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research with another $1 million for the BC CDC to expand the tool. And they came in a few weeks later, having gone through the processes they have to go through.
So that was the start. Where have you gone from there in helping to fund other projects that are going to help to lead to better health outcomes?
Yeah, in the situation of crisis, obviously, we have to bring our main assets to bear. And one of the assets we have is we have emerging issue funding, and we can use that funding very quickly. And we have highly qualified people who can assess proposals, etc. So what we decided to do is to put together a rapid response funding program that allows us to take proposals in, turn them around within 48 hours, and make decisions very quickly, and then have funding flow to the researchers in under a week. We have opened this program on March the 30th, and we closed it down, the intake down yesterday, and we got 185 proposals. And of those 185, we have reviewed over 130 so far, and we have provided funding to 11 projects.
So what was it that you were able to do as an organization to be able to speed up what would have been a longer approval process in a time when we're not facing a healthcare crisis like this one? What were the internal operational changes that you were able to make?
So we had the ability to design a process that allowed us to be very fast, but at the same time allowed us to get a certain quality control in place to make sure we actually fund the right projects and we have a proper review process. So that was the first thing that's more at the managerial level. But then we have a team of sector managers that mostly have PhDs and masters in biology, genetics, microbiology, etc. So they have deep experience scientifically. And we could use that team of sector managers to very quickly review projects according to an evaluation form that we developed that allowed them to apply very clear criteria to analyze these projects. Now, are these reviews as deep, as expansive as they would be in a regular competition? Obviously, they aren't. But at the same time, we could act very, very quickly. And that was the main purpose, because when you want to put measures in place against the pandemic, the earlier, and we're talking days, we're talking weeks, the earlier we can have researchers explore avenues, the earlier we'll have a solution and we can stop things happening.
Well, how important is this research in BC's ability to address the healthcare challenge, not only now, but in the months ahead?
There is different buckets of research that can be applied. Some research informs the public health office on what kind of measures could be advisable or not. And some of it is not biology. It can be operations research, how to deploy hospital staff in a more efficient way, or it can be in statistics and epidemiology to analyze the progression of the pandemic. And other projects build on the research capabilities and capacities we have in place. I think the scientific community agrees that from a measures against COVID-19, there's really two main avenues. There is the vaccine, which is long-term, and the second one is antiviral interventions, be it small molecule drugs, be it protein-based antibody developments. And these are the kind of initiatives that are on the way. We have focused on projects that have an impact on patients, on people within 6 months. So we have pretty much stayed away from vaccines because they're further out and there's lots of funding that goes into it. But we have looked at can existing drugs be repurposed? Can antibodies be developed faster? And are there better testing methodologies and more testing methodologies available?
So for people who don't understand the role of genomics research in this work, can you give them just a snapshot of why being able to start at the genetic level is so vitally important in our ability to fight back against this novel coronavirus?
To be precise, the funding we put out over the past 2 weeks has not focused just on genomics projects.
Right.
We have gone further afield. Having said that, a lot of these projects use genomics as a tool. Genomics allows to analyze the virus. It allows to analyze the reactions of patients. It allows to expand testing. And it is a tool, and you can think about it as molecular biology. So it's really biology at a very small level, and genomics is kind of the microscope that allows to analyze things in a very rapid and efficient way, and to inform the researchers.
Is this the kind of situation that for researchers in the field allows them to sort of propel themselves into areas of research and discovery that may take decades to be able to realize in a more stable environment? And so is there some opportunity in this for us to accelerate development because we're facing this crisis?
Absolutely. I think we will learn a lot about other things than COVID-19 in this process. And I think everybody agrees COVID-19 is probably not the last pandemic that we will face in a world as globalized as the one we live in. The probability of an outbreak turning into a pandemic gets increasingly larger. And so certainly we learn things, but we also learn on how to do things differently from a process point of view. We learn about collaboration. We learn about interdisciplinary projects. So for instance, in one of the projects, we allow a researcher to apply a specific electron microscopy technology to be applied to virology, which is not necessarily the specialty of that researcher, but interdisciplinary teams can now work together on the development of better antibodies. So we learn certainly a lot, but I think right now we're focused on making things happen as quickly as we can with the best quality of research available as possible. And I think once we are beyond the immediacy of the crisis, we'll then have to look back, what kind of lessons have we learned out of that? And if we go back to SARS, we actually stopped the development of solutions to these type of outbreaks and pandemics after SARS was over. And I hope that we're not doing the same mistake this time around.
What does this crisis in our response, particularly at Genome BC, do for the future of the influence and the role of Genome BC as we move forward? As you said, let's not stop, let's keep moving forward. So how does this help position Genome BC to continue to take a leadership role?
But I hope that the measures we have taken will be recognized as measures that were necessary and appropriate. And obviously, the more successful the projects are that we ended up funding, the stronger our case, because it shows that the due diligence we did on the projects, the project selection we did, was reasonable. I think we will be part of the overall economic and financial recovery plans that the province and the federal government will have to put in place. And I think this crisis shows the importance of research and science and bringing research and science and innovation together. So with that recognition, I would expect that governments would also continue to support organizations like Genome BC. Having said that, will that be the immediate priority once we come out of the worst of this situation? I don't know. We'll certainly have these conversations with the provincial government, but at the same time, we have to recognize we are a stable organization. We're doing our job now, and we will continue to promote our value proposition and then have the conversation with government when the time is right, recognizing that they may have other priorities in the meantime.
Well, I want to applaud the speed with which you responded and the multidisciplinary approach that you've taken, because I think it demonstrates how important it is that we do this kind of work, not just for now, but that we also need to be building that culture and community that draws more and more of this work into British Columbia, because it in turn will generate economic activity, which we're desperately going to need as we come out of this. So I think that there's a couple of approaches. There is the healthcare side of it, but there is also your role from an economic perspective in funding ongoing research and a community that will grow and keep people employed, which I think is equally important right now.
Yes, we have also the ability to build that bridge between industry and the scientific and research community. And I think the other thing, this is a system. So we play one part in that overall system. We used our asset of being very fast. In parallel, organizations like the Ministry of Health or the Michael Smith Foundation Health Research are developing their own programs, their own processes that are on a slightly different timelines, but they're extremely well coordinated with the requirements of the ministry and the public health officer. So I think we all have these roles to play, and we have to work together closely, which we do, to bring the best what BC has to offer to that situation.
Do you find in your role that the demands on your time to stay on top of a myriad of details that in other circumstances may not be as pressing also present you with, long days and challenging decisions that you have to make?
Yeah, that comes with the territory, I think, right. And very often, and that's probably true with crisis in general. A lot of people, and there is other people who do that way more than I do right now, work at the pace that's not sustainable in the long term. And I think I'm very fortunate to have an incredibly strong team and everybody pulled together and contributed to that. I think the main thing is to not get distracted. It is so easy to get distracted by the flood of information that comes from everywhere and to lose the focus. And as long as we are focused and sift through information appropriately, I think there is a lot that can be done in a good day of work without having to sacrificing too much of the sleep, which we need to.
Right. So for all of the guests that I've had on, I've been asking them, do you have a quote that you turn to every now and then for a moment of inspiration? Because we all have to take a little breath every now and then. Is there a quote that you find some comfort in that you could share?
Yeah, and there's one which actually it's something that my mother kept telling me when I was little, and it's actually a quote that's attributed to Voltaire originally. And I think it's particularly important when you have to make decisions quickly and with imperfect information. And the quote in French from Voltaire is "Le mieux est l'ennemi du bien," and if you translate it literally, is "the better is the enemy of the good." And it's kind of the comfort that as long as we make appropriate decisions, we're still moving forward in the right direction. And we have to live with imperfection.
Yes. We do. And we can't let that imperfection stand in the way of seeking out better answers. We need to have our eye cast upon the horizon and move towards it. And I applaud you for the work that you're doing there at Genome BC.
But thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity, Stu.
Yeah, thank you, Pascal. Thanks for joining me on this.